welcome to this particular session. My name is Memo Rungui. I'm delighted to have Steve Hunt with us, all the way from the United States of America. He's going to talk to us about technology, disruption, and HR transformation. Steve is an expert in this area. I like the fact that your background is psychology, because I am also an occupational psychologist. We started this discussion long back. Remember the Professor Wendy Johnson, when we were talking about careers and other things. Welcome to the program, Steve.
Thank you. It looks like there's still some other people in the waiting room, Memory.
Yeah, yes, I will admit those. I'm sure you can start.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for this opportunity. I was talking to Memory about this when I started. I have worked all over the world, but I've actually never worked in Africa, and I hope to someday, and I hope I can get some dialogue with you. I have been to Africa, but it's just been as a tourist. I've been to Tanzania and Egypt, but I would love to come back. And so what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to take probably about 35, 40 minutes to go through some observations based on my work, and I'll tell you a little bit about my perspective in a second. I do really hope, though, that you'll ask questions as we go in here, because I would love to learn what you're experiencing and how the stuff that I'm doing is similar or different from what you're doing. And certainly if you have any questions in any way, that I might be able to help you, please don't hesitate to ask as we go along. And remember, I'll ask you to just monitor the chat, and if it makes sense, interrupt me. If not, we'll do questions at the end. So first of all, so what do I do? I'll start with that. My name's Steve Hunt. I've got this great title. I'm the chief expert for work and technology for SAP. So SAP, if you don't know who SAP is, it's an enormous technology company that does what's called enterprise resource planning software. So it's the software that companies use to manage their resources, so financial resources, supply chain resources, customers. But the one that I focus on is human resources, people. And success factors is, there's two big parts of our what we call human experience management, which would be success factors and Qualtrics are both parts of SAP. And those are the main technologies focused on helping companies more effectively manage their workforce. Now I came into SAP through success factors. It was acquired like 7 years ago. And my background is, and kind of to explain my perspective as I get into this, I think it's really important to explain sort of where I'm coming from on this. As my background, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and I've always had an interest in technology as a way to apply our knowledge of psychology to help companies build more effective workforces. And I was asked to join Success Factors pretty early on when the company was founded, because the company saw very big differences in how much value customers were getting from the technology. Some customers were saying, wow, this technology is enabling us to create more effective cultures, make better decisions, create more engaging environments. And other customers were saying, we're not seeing much value from it. We're automating things, but we're not really creating more productive workforces. And obviously, this is a big, it's a big issue for a company that is a cloud technology company like SuccessFactors, which is, we depend on renewals because we get paid for licenses. And so if people aren't getting value, they're not going to renew. So it was a big business issue. But from a technology issue, the challenge the company faced is it was a cloud technology company, which means that, cloud technology, if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically like the apps that you have on your phone. Everyone has the same thing. You can configure differently. Sorry?
Kiran?
Oh, okay. Is that all right? Okay. So, everyone basically has, they can use the technology differently, but everyone has access to the same technology. So the question was, it's not the technology that's making some companies more successful than others. It's something about how they use it. And that's what I was asked to come in and study, which was, how do you use technology to create more effective work environments? And that's what I've been doing at SAP for 15 years, but it's kind of morphed. And now I'm also focusing heavily on how is technology changing the work environments people have to work in, and how does that lead to how do we use technology? And through my work, I've talked to, last time I added it up, it's well over 500 companies from around the world about how to use technology to create more effective human resources practices. which led to this presentation, which a lot of what I do is kind of look at how's technology changing. Now, I will say that this presentation reflects my very strong current North American and sort of Western European focus. I have done a fair bit of work in South America and in Asia, but again, as I mentioned, I've never worked in Africa. But I think a lot of these things are going to apply because they're mainly about people, and people are people the world over. Although the economic conditions, certainly in the labor markets, change, the fundamentals of people don't really change from one culture to another. We're all kind of basically the same at a core psychological level, I should say. Yes, there are differences, but at the core, people are people. So what I'm going to be talking about is how we are seeing the function of human resources being fundamentally changed as a result of both the accelerating pace of disruption, which we are certainly going through right now, as well as innovations in technology. And these kind of feed each other because a lot of the disruption we have is related to the technology. And a lot about how we deal with disruption and change is through using technology. But it requires a different way of thinking about what is the purpose of human resources. And so that's what I'll be sharing. And as I go through this, I hope you'll sort of take notes and think about where you agree with what I'm saying, where you're not quite certain, or where you have questions about it. What I've learned from all of my experiences, there is no one best way to do human resources, but there are sort of good ways to think about it. I think that's what I'm going to be trying to share is ways to think about our profession as human resource professionals. So when I do my presentations, I try to kind of work a little color into it and humor into it. I'm going to be basically telling a tale of two stories coming together. On one hand, the role of human resources in business disruption. And for this, I'm going to use an analogy about disruption. And the analogy I'm going to use is to surfing. Now, I have surfed. I was a terrible surfer, but my nephew, and that's a picture of him, is actually a really good surfer. And we were talking about this, and I was talking about all the changes, and we were talking about how surfing is basically a sport of constant disruption. You know, you're facing different kinds of waves. At times they can be very dangerous. And you're sort of going out, you're getting in the waves, you're coming in, you're going back out. And you're constantly putting yourself to some degree in the way of change. Because that's just what surfing is about. So it's kind of a nice analogy, so we'll get into it, about the different roles HR plays in different phases of disruption that companies go through. Which gets into the second thing I'll be talking about is how HR needs to transform itself to deal with this disruption. You know, and there, just because I like humor, I'm going to use 6 riddles based on my favorite superhero, the Riddler from Batman. And I think it's just because I really like the suit he has with all the question marks on it. Someday I'm going to get one of those suits. So that's the original Riddler from like the 1960s television show. Although I'm not that old, I watched the reruns. So I'm going to check memory really quickly. Am I going at a good pace? Are you able to hear me all right?
Yeah, okay. You can just increase your volume a bit, but it's okay.
Okay, I'll lean in closer. Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, so my first riddle, as I'm talking about transformations in human resources going through, is like, why are transformations in human resources like earthquakes? Because a lot of the changes that we see in human resources are actually a result of things going on sort of below the surface in society and economies that have been going on for years, but we don't see them until they suddenly create a change that we can see. Sort of the same way that, like, the way the tectonics, plate tectonics, which are the plates below the earth that move, lead to mountain ranges coming up or to volcanoes coming up, but we can't see those underlying plates below the earth moving, but we see the reactions on the surface of the earth to them. So, you know, over time they move slowly, then suddenly there'll be an earthquake or a mountain range will start forming. And it's the same idea with the changes that are going on in human resources, is they're really being driven by two fundamental, what I call talent tectonics. That is, shifts, major forces reshaping the very nature of work organizations and societies. And what these two changes are is, first of all, the digitalization of everything. Our world is becoming incredibly connected. I mean, the fact that we're doing this right now is a great example of how connected our world is becoming. That I can have a conversation with people in Africa in near real time is pretty amazing, and how quickly we sort of come to take this for granted. And what this really does is it's accelerating the pace of change. You know, there's a famous saying that the only constant is change, but in reality, now the only constant is an ever accelerating pace of change. And so companies have to deal with things going faster and faster and faster. It's also connecting our world in a way like it's never been connected before. And it's also creating a skill divide, because what technology does is it kind of eliminates semi-skilled jobs and splits them into highly skilled jobs or very unskilled jobs. And so this is kind of having a big impact on the labor market. The second big change that's going on is, and this is really happening the world over, but it's particularly happening in like European, several Asian countries, and in North American countries, and largely also in South American countries. It's not happening as much in Africa, but it's starting to, is we are living longer and having a lot fewer children. And so what this means is the workforce is really aging in a lot of countries, particularly, you know, what they call, you know, sort of more economically developed countries, if you will. Where if you look at countries like Japan, Italy, the United States to some degree, if you controlled for immigration, there are more people leaving the labor market because they're getting older than there are people coming into it in terms of children. So we have more. This has never happened before. Barring sort of like catastrophic events like wars, it has never happened where more people are leaving the labor market in a country than entering it. Yet this is happening in a lot of countries around the world, which is creating much older workforces. It's creating a huge impact on shifting the labor supply. And so what it's saying, like an impact on Africa, where actually you still have relative to the rest of the world, you've got a very young population. You're going to see a lot of shift to companies to say, we need more workers, we need more younger workers. And you're seeing much more focus on increasing workforce diversity because of this. And aside from the social value of having inclusive work environments, it's largely driven by we need skilled labor. If you have skills, regardless of what your demographic background is or your disabilities, we need to find a way to bring you into the workforce. So these two changes are leading to some fundamental changes in the nature of work itself. And they're creating particularly an intersection between human resources and how human resources uses technology. And this is like specialized HR applications, something called human experience management and intelligent enterprise. And I'm going to talk about all of these, but I'm going to talk about them in the context of massive disruption. And we are just going through a massive disruption at a global level right now. But if you look at specific industries and companies are going through major disruptions all the time. I mean, what's different about what we're going through right now, and I'm not trying to, and it's not trivial, it's very major, but the big difference is it's affecting every country and every economy and every industry around the world simultaneously. But if you look at individual countries, individual economies, or individual industries, they're all experiencing significant disruption on a regular basis. Not at the level that we're going through here, but still pretty major. Like, you know, the drop in oil prices, which is tied to the pandemic. But I've worked a long time with oil and gas, and that is a very volatile industry. You know, it can say everything's going up. But there's a joke in Texas that's like, for the people that work in oil and gas, that they're like, please, Lord, just send me one more oil boom. I promise not to blow all the money this time. Because the oil and gas industry just goes like this. It's happening also in other industries. And so this disruption is becoming a sort of a regular part of running a company. And what this is doing is it's really elevating the importance of human resources if human resources positions itself as the people to help companies deal with disruption. And human resources is the logical one to play in this role. Because if you look at a world of change, basically what running a business is about managing three things. It's about providing people tools and technology to deal with their business environment. Conversely, technology is changing the environment that people have to deal with. But if you look at it as when you're running a company, you hire people to like go out and engage the market, but you give them tools to engage the market. Now when you look at these three things, which are sort of the basic components of running a company, the environment changes all the time. We're going through just a massive change right now. Markets change, politics change things, regulations change. Now we also know that technology just keeps changing faster and faster. The one thing that is not changing in this thing is people. Because people at a fundamental level, we do not change that much. We do not evolve that fast. Now you might say, well, what about all the talk about Generation X and millennials and baby boomers and all that? Well, the good research on generational differences, which is not we went out and surveyed 220-somethings last week, but research that really tries to control for things like how old you are, whether or not you have children, whether or not you're married, the state of the economy that you're in, which are all things you need to control when you're trying to look at generational differences. There are studies that have done this, and one study goes back to the World War I generation, back to 1920, and what they found is the fundamentals of people in terms of what we want, our basic abilities and personality, what we want from work, what makes us happy, has not really changed. Our expectations that we'll get it change a lot based on the economy, but what we actually want doesn't change that much, which means people are the one stable part of an organization. And that's critical because you often hear when there's changes, companies talk about, we need to pivot. The company needs to pivot, right, to deal with this change. As a friend of mine was telling me once, said, look, in order to pivot, you have to have a stable place to put your foot. And people are the stable place for organizations to pivot. It's the one stable part of the company. And the other thing that is interesting about people, and I'll come back to this later, is people are actually the best resource companies have for dealing with change too. Because people are the only resource that you can look at and say, hey, you were looking this way and working on that. Now I want you to look this way and work on that. And they can go, okay, and they can do it. Now that doesn't mean they're going to be good at it or they're going to want to do it, but you can't do that with a machine. You can't just walk in and say, stop doing that and start doing this. Not only can people change really quickly, and we've just seen this. I mean, look at this move to remote work. People talk about it. What's amazing here is we just had entire companies, entire countries move to remote work. And yeah, there have been difficulties, absolutely. But the wheels have not fallen off, as we say in the United States. Companies are still functioning. Things are still happening. And if you had gone to a company and said, hey, we think you should move your entire workforce remote in 3 weeks, they would have said, oh, that's impossible. We can't possibly do it. But in the reality is that people, if they're motivated and they have the right technology and they understand it, can change incredibly fast. So the challenge is, how do we tap into that on a regular, effective basis? How does HR professionals, do we help companies fully leverage people's ability to deal with change? Which gets to my next riddle. Why are many HR practices like computer keyboards? And the answer is, if you look at your keyboard in front of you, it is probably, if it's like most, it's called a QWERTY keyboard, which means the keys in the upper left are Q, W, E, R, and T. Now, I don't know if you've ever wondered this, but in the English language and most Romance languages, the most common letters in the language are E and A. Have you ever wondered why the letter E, which is one of the most common letters in the language, is typed with what is the weaker hand for most people and the weakest finger of that hand, and you have to actually move it? shouldn't the letter E, if it's the most common letter, be under like this finger? And the answer is, it's like, why is it designed this way? And the answer is because the QWERTY keyboard, a common keyboard, is designed to slow you down. It slows you down by about 50% than if you used an intelligently designed keyboard that did have the letter E under this finger. You say, okay, well, why? Why do we use this keyboard? Because when typewriters were originally invented in like 1870, they had keys that would hit paper, and if you typed too fast, they would jam. So they designed these keyboards to slow you down so you could type using the technology that was available in 1870. And we still use these keyboards. Why? Because they're familiar. We would never use them if we had modern technology. They make no sense. Well, this is the same thing about so many HR practices. I mean, if you look at the shift to remote work is an interesting one. What we've learned over the last 4 weeks is people could have been working remotely all along. We've also learned, because we've done research on it, that a lot of people prefer to work remotely, so employees wanted to work remotely. And a lot of employees, and this has a lot to do with the homes they live in, but a lot of employees are far more productive working remotely because they don't have to spend all this time in traffic. So why didn't we move before? Because leaders were comfortable with everybody going to an office, even though it really didn't make any sense. And this is something I've heard from a lot of HR leaders, is they say, we hope that leaders change their mindset about things like remote work as a result of this. But I can apply the same thing to lots of HR practices. The annual performance review. A lot of research shows the annual performance review, all it does is encourage managers to give feedback one time a year in a very typically ineffective conversation. And you're like, if we had always had social and mobile technology like this, I don't think we ever would have had annual traditional performance reviews. Why do we still use them? We know there's better ways to manage performance using modern technology, but we still use them because they're familiar, the same way we still use these keyboards. What this means is if we're moving into a world of hyper change, two things. One, companies are not going to succeed in the future if they manage people like they did in the past, because the future is different. It is moving so much faster than it has in the past. We have to tap into people's innate ability to deal with change, but that means we need to manage people with change in mind. We're not managing people for productivity so much as managing them for learning and adaptability, which psychologically are very different things. And the other thing is, because the pace of speed of technology, any HR process that's designed over 3 years ago is probably outdated. That doesn't mean it needs to be redesigned, but you would not design it now the way you did then, because technology has moved forward so far and so fast. So we have to really embrace technology as a way to constantly update how we do human resources. Because human resources, like everything else, is a technology field now. The days of sort of paper and pencil are behind us. So I'm going to dive into these now, kind of having set that stage of we live in a world of constant change. We live in a world of technology permeating everything. And companies need HR to help them leverage people's ability to deal with all these changes being thrown at them. And this gets into looking at sort of what is change about? It's about disruption. Sometimes it's disruption we create, but probably more often it's about disruption that is created that we have to deal with. And disruption can be, sometimes it's an opportunity, sometimes it's about minimizing risk, but it can be catastrophic if it's not managed the right way. And disruption, when it goes through, it's really there's sort of three phases. There's the phase of reacting when something major changes, which is we're kind of right in this right now with COVID and the pandemic, of reacting to this major disruption. Then there's a phase of responding and saying, okay, we're kind of past that, but now we have to get ready for the future changes that are going to come. And the third is, how can we reshape the organization to reimagine the company itself to deal better with a future that looks different than the past? And in each of these, when I talked earlier about the roles of technology, different technologies are playing different roles in each of these phases of disruption. So I'm going to go through each of these. Any questions or comments, Memory, before I go on? This would be to phase two.
Yeah, I think you can proceed. There are no questions as yet. We should probably get questions at the end.
All right, good, because I'm not that clear, so I know there must be some questions out there. So this first phase, reacting, what is the role of human resources when a company is going through significant disruption, either like we're going through right now, or it could be, suddenly an economic change, something happening in the business operation. This is like the surfer who has just had a massive wipeout. Things were going on well, and then all of a sudden, whoa, the world turned upside down. What this person wants right now is immediate help with their specific problems. They're looking for HR to say, help me deal with what is preventing me from getting back and going again. This person in this picture does not want coaching on how to be a better surfer. They just want, get me out of here now, and then we'll figure out the next step. So what the role of HR here is to listen, demonstrate empathy, and provide very focused solutions. Now, one of the things that is really changing the nature of HR in the last 5 years, and it's really been fueled by cloud technology platforms, is there has been an absolute explosion of specialized applications for different human resource functions. I mean, literally thousands of different applications. And like in SAP, we've really embraced this. So like in our own app community, we have several hundred, and we're adding them all the time. Specialized technologies that companies can deploy through our system to meet very specific needs. And to give you what I mean by specialized, DocuSign is a technology that allows you to capture people's signatures electronically, so you don't have to have them use paper and pencil. I picked ones that suddenly became unbelievably important in COVID. This has suddenly become a critical tool for organizations. Some companies weren't using it before because they're like, oh, is it legally safe? I don't know, and different legal perspectives. Suddenly it was, this is the only way we can really get people's signatures. And now this application exploded in its use. Alert Enterprise is a technology for security access and tracking. And one of the things becoming really important for companies is what it does is it links staffing to security technology. So you can, one, control people's access to areas based on their staff. Are you on this assignment? Should you have access to this area? But also it allows you to track where people are. And this has become really critical when they're trying to manage return to work. If somebody has had exposure, where have they been in the organization or the physical plant, so that we can know who else may have been exposed. Best Money Moves is a tool that's designed to provide employees with guidance on how to more effectively manage their finances. Now, this is in some industries where employees are facing significant loss of wages, suddenly this is becoming a really important tool. So we're seeing a lot of customers using this. And then the last one that I'd share, and this last one's free if anyone wants to use it, is something by Qualtrics, which is part of SAP, called Remote Work Pulse, which was a technology that when COVID hit and there was a move to remote work, we put together a specialized technology to sort of measure the experience remote work employees are having. This technology went from no one using it because it didn't exist to over 7,000 organizations using it in less than 3 weeks. Now, the funny thing is, like in 12 months, will 7,000 organizations be using it? I don't know, but it's very specialized tools that meet very specialized needs. So when this role for HR is learning and being aware of all these different applications that are out there so that when specific crises hit or specific needs that people have, you're able to provide them with a tool. It's like, yeah, we got an app for that. And so this is sort of embracing this understanding. And whenever you're looking at these things, when you're asked specific questions from managers struggling with issues, chances are there's been some technology developed to help with it. You just need to find where it is and make sure that you have a platform so that you can deploy it to people. That's the response. That's the reacting phase. The second phase in dealing in a world of disruption is the responding, where you're getting people ready for the next round of change. And it's about how do you manage the workforce where people deal with change effectively. They view change as an opportunity as opposed to a threat. They approach change with a learning mindset as opposed to a survival mindset. And this is about managing people in a way that gives them a sense of commitment, engagement, and confidence. And on this one, it's tapping into people's fundamental ability to deal with change. I remember I was asked by somebody once, how do you train a workforce to be adaptable and agile? And I said, that's the wrong question. We are born with the ability to learn. The competitive niche of humans as a species is our ability to adapt to changing environments. We're very good at it. Sadly, other animals are not. That's why there's more people in the world every year and less animals. We're really good at adapting to changing environments. It's called learning. And it's something that we're wired to do. When a baby is born, it basically knows how to do three things. It knows how to eat, it knows how to poop, and it knows how to learn. And it's amazing how good they are at all three of those things. But when you're a parent, what you're largely doing is creating an environment where the child can learn, creating it, supporting it. And it's amazing how fast kids learn because we're wired for it. The problem is that when we start managing people as employees, we stop managing them for learning and just manage them to be productive. But we're most productive when we're doing stuff we already know how to do. So if I'm managing somebody for productivity, it's very different from managing them for learning. But when we're in a world of constant change, we need to manage them with learning in mind. Which gets to my third riddle, which is, why is talent management like river rafting? And the answer is, I don't know if anyone here has ever been river rafting, but the answer is that if you do it right, it's actually very fun and exhilarating. If you do it wrong, it's absolutely terrifying. River rafting, and I tell this story, and I'm like, when I'll do it like as a live presentation, I'll often ask if anyone in the audience has been river rafting. Somebody will raise their hand. And I'll ask them, did you have to do it? And they're usually like, no, I was like on vacation. Did you pay money for it? Yeah. Did you have a good time? Yeah. And then I'll ask, did you know you can drown? And they'll be like, well, yeah. I'm like, so you voluntarily introduced change into your life. You paid money to introduce change into your life that could have killed you. Clearly, we don't fear change. We seek it out in the right conditions. And river rafting to some degree captures these right conditions, which is, we're very good at dealing with change when certain fundamental human needs are being met. And these needs are some degree reflected in a good river rafting trip. The first one is achievement. People are wired to want to accomplish meaningful goals. River rafting is fun because you know why you're doing it and you kind of know where you're going. If you just got in the boat and didn't know where you were going, it probably wouldn't be very fun. But the sense of the reason that you're going, you have a leader that you more or less trust you on how to get there. You don't know exactly how you'll get there, but that's part of the fun, but you know what the purpose is. And making sure that people's jobs tie to something that gives them a sense of meaning, either in terms of their career or in terms of their personal life goals, which can include providing for their families, so that they understand, why they're going to work every day, why it matters. And this gets at a very fundamental human need. If you look at people, we're born with this desire to accomplish meaningful goals. It's why children, as soon as they can crawl, they try. Just because it feels good to do things that are accomplishments for us. Conversely, one of the terms for depression is, my life is meaningless. So making sure that employees have a sense of what they're doing, why it's important, feel recognized and appreciated, not just monetarily, but in terms of what you're doing adds value. And what really drives most people is either what I'm doing is helping me build my own career, and what I'm doing is helping other living things in some way, shape, or form. That's tend to what people get a lot of sense of meaning from. The second one is a sense of community. Humans are social creatures. We don't do well when we feel isolated and alone. And going back to my river rafting example, part of what makes river rafting fun is you're doing it with other people. You're all working together and you're paddling together. It would not be as fun if you were just by yourself. And so when you're looking for people to deal with change, is finding ways to create a sense of community and belonging to a group. This is where things like social learning technology, collaboration technology, so employees, even if they're not physically together, feel connected to other people that are facing similar challenges, where they can share ideas, where they can, support each other, is really critical for creating an adaptable organization. And the third one is something it's called need for security, which is a feeling that the company cares about us as people. We're not just job IDs and paychecks, which is, you cannot in most organizations, promise job security, but you can say we're going to do what we can to minimize the risk that, you're going to be financially at risk, or that you're going to be physically at risk. Finding ways to demonstrate a sense of supporting people as people. And this is, if you get, what's interesting is if you get these three things, if you have these three things, people can deal with amazing amounts of change. But if any one of them drops below a certain level, change turns from exhilarating growth to terrifying survival. And if you think about your own career, probably some of the most enjoyable times in your own career were times of significant change. And it was stressful, but it was good stress. It was the stress of getting things done, like a new job assignment or a big project, and you were working with a team of people and you're working together to get stuff done. And so looking at how can you create this environment in your organization, and technology plays a huge role in this in terms of talent management technology to connect people, make sure people have clear goals, get ongoing recognition, social learning and collaborative technology, and also there's some interesting technologies to give people a sense of inclusion and well-being. But looking at what are we doing in our organization to create these three things for all employees. And one thing to look at this, which has been a big advance in technology, gets to my fourth riddle, which is, why is managing a company like watching a silent movie? And the answer is because the way a lot of companies are managed, you may know what people are doing and who is in the organization, but you do not know what they are thinking. Just like in a silent movie, we don't know if these people are have a question or if they're scratching their head. We don't know what's going on inside of their heads. But if you turn the sound on in a movie, suddenly you understand what they're thinking and what's going on. It's the same in organizations. But what is the sound? The sound in organizations is employee experience, which gets into a new, sort of the next evolution in HR technology, which is something called human experience technology. And what this is specifically is, if you look at an organization, basically running a company involves four things. Companies and leaders make decisions. Those decisions are reacted to by employees based on how they react, and that's experience. The employees decide what they want to do, which leads to business outcomes. So I'll use like pay for performance as an example. Imagine a leader said, I want to tie compensation more clearly to performance, so we reward high performers. We're going to implement a new pay for performance method. Well, that's a leadership decision, and you can put technology in place to implement better pay for performance. But what's the first thing that happens when you roll out a new pay for performance solution? Employees react to it. They understand it, they don't understand it, they like it, they dislike it. How they react, how they experience this change is going to influence their actual behavior. Are they going to work harder, less hard? Are they going to quit? Which will lead to business outcomes. Traditionally, in human resources, we for a long time had technology to measure workforce characteristics. How many people do we have and what roles? How much are we paying them? Things like that. We've also for quite a long time had what's called strategic HR technology, which is technology to support staffing or performance management processes or compensation processes. What we have not had until recently, because it didn't exist, was technology to measure this middle one, employee experience. And this is about technology that basically asks employees questions, does other things to track employees' feelings so you have a better understanding of how employees are reacting to the experiences that you're creating. And if you don't have a good understanding of that, you're really just guessing. You're just doing things to people and hope they'll work out without actually understanding how people are feeling about the things that are being done to them. And at the end of the day, leadership is not about what leaders do. Leadership is about what employees do. And employees don't do things because leaders want them to. Employees do things because they want to do them. And you can't really understand that if you don't start measuring experience. And this is really critical as we lead into a world of constant change, where suddenly people are not good at being adaptable, creative, and service-oriented if they feel stressed, undervalued, isolated, or at risk. I'm going to jump over this. And then the last thing I want to touch on is the third phase, which is redefining. So you've got a workforce that's really adaptable. You've got tools to help them deal with specific problems. This last one is about rethinking what an organization should look like overall. And you'll hear this a lot as we're going through the COVID pandemic. A lot of people talk about a new normal, a new way of organizations. Are we going to go back to like working on site in offices full time? What other changes are going to happen as a result of this? And this is about really rethinking organizations at a fundamental level in terms of how we design them, how we build a workforce, and how we build the talent in the workforce. And this is something particularly easier if you're in a smaller organization, honestly. Really rethinking some fundamental assumptions about work to say, because most organizations, going back to my keyboard example, a lot of organizations are designed based on assumptions that are really rooted in the 1920s and 30s. So if I start, for example, the assumption about where we work, there's an assumption that people have to be together to work together. That's not true in a digital world. We don't have to physically be together. And I kind of put these comics up because I think in my career I've collected a lot of HR humor. And so but I think humor about work is often very cynical because it's people making fun of things we do that don't actually make sense to be doing. And so commuting for a lot of people doesn't make sense. And really re-challenging that assumption about, where do we need to hire people based on their willingness to commute to an office? What's more important, what they do or where they sit? And when you start rethinking an organization more virtually, it opens up a whole new labor pool, a whole new area of talent. It does require a different way of managing, but it's a real fundamental shift. The second one, when we work, and this was kind of a political poster I saw when I was in school that said, if you like school, you will love work. Work a prison of measured time. Kind of very depressing, but to some degree, it's true. And one of the things, and some of the customers I talked about with dealing with this COVID crisis, like one customer runs pharmacies and their employees are at tremendous risk, under tremendous pressure, because they're on the front line, exposed to the virus. They've got their families at home. And one of the things they did that they said really helped is they used an application, an HR technology application that allowed employees to collaborate to set their own shifts. So instead of the company telling them when they work together to decide how they could manage their own schedule. And it got to the point that people do not all have to work the same fixed schedule to get the same things done, and giving people more control over their own schedule is incredibly empowering. And we have technology to do that now. The only reason we don't do it is if we still rely on running companies the way they were run in factories in the 1930s. We don't need to run companies this way anymore. The third one, how we work. This is the growth and use of contractors. One of the areas now is that's really expanded by technology is the ability to employ people part-time or as contractors. Yet a lot of companies still think about contractors as temporary employees, and this is sort of, this cartoon is no pressure, but you know how easy it would be to get rid of you as a contractor. Really realizing that just because somebody's not a full-time employee doesn't mean they're not fully committed to work. And rethinking the nature of how we design jobs. The fourth one, why we work, and the cartoon here says, I didn't like working 4 days a week, 50 weeks a year for 40 years, but I needed the money. Money is always important for work, but there's a lot of research that it's not necessarily the most important thing. If it gets below a certain level, it becomes really important. But people are willing to work for different reasons and rethinking. And one of the things we're seeing coming out of COVID is a lot of companies are willing to say, hey, rather than fire you, we'll lower your salary for a while. And people are okay with it if they understand it and they believe it's done in good faith. And then the last one is about what makes us successful. And this cartoon says, in another 6 months, these MBAs will be ready for market, which is this idea that experience and certain years of experience are always critical to do a role. There's a lot of very interesting technologies and methods that allow us to not focus on what people have done, but understanding the potential and capabilities of what they could do through using more sophisticated assessment tools and other methods. And so really opening up the candidate population to a broader number of people. So really challenging organizations to say, look, it's a different labor market. It's a world of hyper change. It's a world where technology enables us to do things radically differently from how we did them in the past. We should start really challenging some of these fundamental assumptions. And I'm gonna just jump to this because I want to have some time for questions, but I'll end with this last riddle. How is the HR profession similar to surfing? And the answer is because it's about voluntarily putting yourself into change over and over again, but you also need technology that is a surfboard and different surfboards. Like my nephew, who's a really good surfer, has like 18 surfboards depending on the waves he's going into. And going out there and putting ourselves into the thick of things and finding the thrill of change. And with that, we cannot slow down the pace of change in the world. Today what was the quote I heard, that the world has never moved faster than it's moving now and will never move this slowly again. We can't change that, but we can make sure that we learn to ride the waves of change instead of being tossed at that. And that's about accepting that HR is a technology field. That doesn't mean you have to be a technology expert, but you need to understand what technology can do and how to use it. We need to embrace employee experience and not focus on process compliance, but what is the experience that we're giving people at work? Get comfortable with data. At least look at the data you have, even to learn we don't have good data, but surface it. And last, get engaged in business conversations. Challenge those assumptions. Challenge business leaders to say, look, people are the most important and also the biggest source of cost and often the biggest source of variability in business performance. How they are managed matters. How we design jobs is going to influence the kind of people we can get, and really push back on that and really challenge those questions to get leaders to think about people ahead of time and not as an afterthought. So with that, I will stop. I hope you found this interesting. We have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I think we can take questions. You can put your questions on the chat if you don't want to ask directly. or you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. Any questions?
I have a question for group. Well, of the things I shared, are there any that, as I said, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is I'd like to learn more about HR in Africa. What are the things that I shared that seemed relevant, or are there things that I shared that said that might be true in the United States, it's not true here?
Okay, let's see. Let's hear if there's anything. I think for me, I think the issue of employee experience is a big issue, although it has not been taken to the right levels, probably in this part of Africa. But I know some of the companies that are multinational and with leading practices, they're already looking at issues of employee experience. But majority of them, they tend just to focus on employee engagement and end there. And there's no connection with employee engagement to business. Then, yeah, Karen?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting you go back because I think I kind of jumped over this, but if you look at employee experience, so you have classic HR, strategic HR on the left, right people, right things in the right way. Experience management is about looking at how people react to things, and engagement is sort of like, is my job fulfilling? But the two other things that have a really big impact on experience, one is, does the company doesn't waste my time? As an example of this, have you ever yelled at your phone or computer before? That a lot of companies, if you look at the technology that they're rolling out and the processes, it's increasing people's blood pressure at scale. I mean, we subject employees to things, and if you really getting leaders to understand, we don't want to frustrate people. It's not good for them. And one of the challenges on that is actually to, and I'm not seeing very many companies do it, but to actually have their senior executives to say, look, you complete all the same process you ask your employees to do. Go through the experience your employees are going through. Yeah. Because a lot of experience management is about this. It's making sure people don't feel frustrated and they feel part of a group. It's not just about engagement.
Yep. The other issue, Steve, is what would be, maybe let me take a question from Diana first. Diana, sir, you can go ahead. Go ahead,
I think for me, it's just a comment. It's not a question in terms of what stops us in terms of embracing technology, especially when you're looking at the African context. Normally, it's changing the mindset of leadership in terms of embracing technology itself. And the other one is budget. Budget is always a constraint in terms of why technology, we are not moving as fast because finance is not always available to do that.
Yeah, maybe before you answer, Steve, that is related to the question that I have. What is the business, how do you put a business case for digitalization of the HR function? Because if you're not, you'll find that most of the time the finance function is fully digitalized, operations fully digitalized, but HR probably nothing besides payroll.
Yeah, I think it's a couple. I mean, it's a lot of things, but I think one of them is that making people aware that people can be highly productive or very unproductive, and whether or not how productive they are has a lot to do with the experience they have. And starting to find ways to make the organization aware where we're giving them so much of our experience is driven by either the technology we have or how we're managed. And finding ways to make the organization more aware of that through whether you can do experience management surveys. And on the cost of the technology, though, a lot of the technology is not, I mean, some systems are relatively expensive, but a lot of these specialized applications are not that expensive. And I think that's getting the organization, particularly the senior leaders, to say younger employees, because if you grew up with this kind of technology, you get very frustrated if you go to work for an organization that requires you to use technology that was created before you were born. And it's not having to do with, it's not that older people can't learn technology as fast as younger people. They can. But it's like older people tend to be more like, well, our technology is not super good, but it's better than it used to be. With younger employees, there's no used to be. So a lot of you say, look, if our company is competing for skilled talent, part of what we got to compete on is experience that we're providing them. And a lot of that's going to be driven by technology.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I think a lot of senior leaders are just not aware of how important it is because they're like, well, I'm not affected by it. And it's like, well, yeah, because you have an administrative assistant.
Okay, any other question? Yeah, but the other issue, Steve, is you were talking in your presentation, you talked about data. I think there was a slide where you were talking about data. I was reading one of your articles some time back where you were talking about HR information that is out of context. There's no business context to it. Could this be the same challenge here? Because when you come up with an HR system or a digitalization, you want to be able to help the business. There's another slide where you were showing business outcomes. I think the biggest challenge is how do we link what we are doing in HR to business outcomes, whether we are implementing new technology. People want to have will productivity go up after you have implemented this particular system.
Yeah, this is actually, and I jumped over this because this is probably the most advanced technology, but I think it's the next level, which is the challenge. Very hard to do if you don't have any technology at all, which is if you look at, there's something called the intelligent enterprise, which is the next level of HR. And this is really why I kind of jumped over this because it's like very cutting edge, which is we're getting to a point where we can finally link HR systems to business systems. And if you look, HR always talks about being relevant to the business, but I'll give you an example of where we are now and how this is going to change it. And this is true even for very large companies. I was talking to the head of compensation for a very big global company, and he was telling me about how they moved to our technology. And he said he used to have $500 million a year of merit increase and bonus floating around on Excel spreadsheets. And he said, because it's a big, giant global company. And he said, we moved to cloud technology. It's been great because now all that data is in one place and we're able to keep track of this $500 million and how it's being spent. And I said, that's great. And I asked him, what's the return on investment you get from that $500 million you spend every year? And he looked at me and he said, well, people don't quit and they don't complain too much. And we sort of laughed because we said, could you imagine going to a CFO and saying, hey, I want to spend $500 million a year. And the bar is people won't quit and they won't complain too much. And we sort of said, but that's the state of where a lot of companies are when it comes to understanding the value of people. And the challenge is you can't know the value of people by just looking at HR data. You've got to link it to business data somehow. And this is, even if you can link it conceptually, where you start talking to a company and don't focus on necessarily turnover or engagement, focus on how is turnover or engagement affecting customer service, productivity, safety, things that have financial dollars associated with them. When you can start making that connection, it becomes much easier for people to understand why we need to invest in managing people differently. Now, this is getting back to my business conversations. Whenever I'm talking to business leaders, if they're not in HR, the first question that I ask is not about what HR processes do you want. I ask them, what are you trying to do to drive profit and growth in your company? And they'll say, like we're trying to launch a new product or we're trying to expand into a new region. And then I'll say, well, if you're going to do that, what do you need people to do in the future that's different from what they did in the past? And they'll say, we need people to be better at learning, or we need to hire more skilled people. And then I talk about HR. but it's always starting the HR conversation with the stuff on the right in this graphic. Never, don't talk to a business leader about talent or turnover or skills. Talk to them about customer service, manufacturing productivity, because that's what they care about.
Yeah. Another question here says, how can HR professionals as well as learning institutions develop relevant skill sets for the HR of today going into the future? I think that's Morgan. He's talking about the future skills of HR. What do they need in order to be able to work in this disrupted environment that you were talking about?
I think it's three big things. One, HR needs to understand the business and how the business makes money and how that's impacted by people. Mm-hmm. People on most companies are the single largest operating cost, or one of, if not the biggest operating cost. People are also the biggest source of variability in the performance of a company, depending on their skills and motivation. Mm-hmm. And so as HR, that ability to understand if the business is going to hit its strategic goals around profit and growth, it needs people to do these things. Mm-hmm. And making that connection. The second big thing for HR is understanding what makes people productive as opposed to compliance and administrative, because the compliance stuff is getting automated and so how do you create an adaptable organization? How do you create motivated employees? Understanding that. And then the third one is embracing the use of technology and understanding the technology that's available, looking for ways within the cost constraints of your company, but there's finding ways to use technology, because you can't scale your expertise. Unless you're in a very small company, you cannot scale it personally. People are not going to interact with you directly. And so you have to find some way to get your HR expertise in what they do interact with. And what they interact with is this. Mm-hmm. So finding a way to get your HR processes into mobile phones.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Maybe we should just take one more question, then we are done. Any other question?
Yes, somebody, I have a question.
Yes, Prosper.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Quite an eye-opening presentation you gave us. Two things, actually. One, traditionally, organizations or the decision makers in organization believe in assets being something that things that are present in the asset register and have a sort of a dollar value, which gives us an indication of what the organization is worth to anyone who wants to gauge the value of the organization. But we're looking at data, data, information, whatever we use in making decisions in the organization about employees and all that. It's said to be the oil of today. Like oil used to be the money spinner then. Now the money spinner is what is data. Is there, in your experience, a way or a formula to assign a dollar value to data, make it present in the asset register of an organization, so that when you're appealing to the leaders, you are talking about something that they understand and something that adds dollar value to an organization?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it's hard. I think what I would say on this one is the challenge of data is once you have it, you can show its value, but you can't get it until you have technology typically, but you can't get the technology because you can't the data to show its value. So, what I would say is when you're trying to build a case that we need to invest in doing something better. So I'll use an example like goal management. I have a good story on this one. There is a lot of research in psychology that people are far more effective when they have clear and meaningful goals. It goes back to that need for achievement I was talking about, you should know why you're coming to work and what you're supposed to do, not as opposed to just coming to work and being told what to do. When you have clear goals, you get to go to work to do something as opposed to just being bossed around all the time. And so lots of research on that. If you go into a lot of companies, one of the big complaints employees say is, I don't have clear goals. It's not clear what I'm supposed to do or why it matters. And so there's very good technology out there to help employees set goals and understand this. But you're like, well, how are you going to build the case for that technology? Well, if you had data on goals, you could show how many people didn't have goals and the impact that has. But you can't get that data until you have the technology. So the way you have to do that, I think, is you can show examples of other companies and what they're doing and how this other technology has helped them. But I think often an even more powerful example is just to talk to leaders and say, what is it we want the organization to look like? What do we want people to know and be doing in the future that they're not doing now? So I use this example of goals. One of the best and most effective deployments I saw of goal management technology came out of a conversation HR had with a business leader, which was the company was changing its strategy, and the leader was saying, hey, it's important everyone needs to understand what this strategy is, and they need to understand the role they play on it. And so they said, well, that's really about every employee being able to tell you what they're working on and how it relates to your goals. And the CEO's like, yeah. And they said, well, if you want to be able to walk up to any employee in this company and ask them, what are you working on and how does it relate to what I think is important? That would be really good. And the guy's like, yeah, of course, that would be fantastic. People should be able to do that. And then they said, well, the only way we're going to be able to do that is through goal management technology. Because we agree that's a change you want. If you want that change, the only way we can do it at scale in a sustainable manner is through technology that enables us to do this. So a lot of it, I think, in sort of building this case for technology and data, sometimes has to start with just simply a qualitative conversation about how, in a very, very meaningful way, how you want to change the organization. And you could give other examples about, do you want your employees spending a lot of time at work filling out forms? Do you pay them to fill out forms? No. Well, and then show them maybe some data or some examples of this is how long it takes to sign up for a training course, or this is so that the leaders understand the change you want to create. That I think sometimes has to be the starting point.
Yeah.
Then once you create that change, then you start getting the data, and then you can start linking the data to financial outcomes. But you get that, I think often to get the start, it has to be more qualitative. So very long answer to your question. I hope that helped.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve, for this insightful presentation. I think we have come to the end of our session. Very helpful. I will share the recording with the people through our website, and I'll also share the link with you later on tomorrow so that we can share. You can also share on your platforms. Thank you very much, Steve. I know it's midnight there, isn't it?
I know, I'm pretty good at bed. Well, thank you. Thanks to everyone to join. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Questions, suggestions. I welcome the dialogue, and so thank you very much.
Yes, we will share the presentation extensively so that people can connect with you as well within our platforms. Thank you very much. Thank you.